is our guest here. Yes, Ben.
I see you raising your hand. I think invited Ben up.
There we go.
Ben, are you here?
Yes. How's it going? Although when I accepted it, it just changed the audio output. Can you hear me? Is my audio good?
Audio's good to me, but I don't know. Like Mr. Judgmental over there apparently has got issues with everybody. How does Ben sound? Ben sounds okay?
Ben sounds great. Ben, especially in comparison to some people.
Okay. We're stack ranking ourselves already. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. I was listening, Adam, to our episode from last week with the chime. We proposed ringing a chime whenever we refer to previous episodes, and you hit that one as a bit of an Easter egg. You didn't actually talk about the fact you'd done that.
I did. Here's the thing. When I have to go edit like an hour and a half plus episode, I'm going to sneak little things in here and there. So, stay on your toes, Bryan.
It's provocative. Absolutely. I thought it was a test of the emergency broadcasting system. I hand on heart. And this is surely something that has not left the generational chasm, the emergency broadcasting system. Ben, do you have any idea what we're talking about?
I don't think I do.
That's like, am I in the right Discord? I have stumbled. Am I in some Gen X retirement home? Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So there was and I always thought as a kid, this felt antiquated. There was something called the emergency broadcasting system, and they would have these tests of the emergency broadcast system where they would have these long beeps. So Adam, my question for you is, did you ever see an emergency broadcast on the emergency broadcast? Because we got these tests all the time growing up, right? Watching TV.
No, I don't think I did. And I feel like the other day I was driving, I got a silver alert, and I feel like it's a similar kind of thing where you're like, your phone erupts or whatever, but it was like, 30 years ago instead. So your TV just starts bleeping.
And growing up, I actually did have an actual emergency, an actual use of the emergency broadcasting system for a tornado alert in Colorado, Eastern Colorado. So,
well, there you go.
There, exactly. But so but that is not what that chime was. That chime was something historical relevance. The internet needs me to understand.
It does, yeah. So I used the chime, which was the Mac Plus boot up sound.
Oh my God, Diet Coke almost came out my nose. Like the dog barked right on the word chime.
She's like no, she knows what's up. Okay, thanks, Pop. Thanks. Part of it is, honestly, I think of that chime every day because oh God, hold on. I gotta deal with this.
It's like the dog is like, you're not giving me credit for the chime. It was my idea to use that sound. I know this guy is going to pass it off on his own, and the dog's very upset. Ben, I'm so sorry. We have a long-standing tradition of not introducing our topic for some number of, but we're running towards the end of the banter, so don't worry. We'll get there. The dog.
Sorry about that.
So what is the chime, Adam?
Oh, so chime is the Mac Plus boot up sound, which I think about almost every day, which is a little embarrassing because my son's school, like the bells that announce the start of the class, are exactly the tones that the Mac Plus made if you seeded it DIMS incorrectly. SIM, excuse me. It's SIM incorrectly. So if you did that, it would have this kind of like nasty startup sound, and I think of it every day. But I did the affirmative startup sound.
Do you realize that this is the equivalent of someone coming by our school growing up in the 80s being like, your school bell reminds me of the sound an RCA Victor would make as you wound up the tube. I mean,
in my defense, this is the first time I've articulated this. Okay, I have not even imposed this useless. Yeah, I mean, I have not even imposed this useless observation on my wife, who she would say I impose every useless observation I have on her. But there are more. Exactly.
There are many more. Sorry, where this came from. Yeah. There's many, many more. All right. Well, so a very special sound to you. Sounds like the emergency broadcasting system to me, but it was great. I thought it was great. It was nice to have a little chime when we reference previous episodes. And I think we're going to be referencing, I just got to say, get the chime warmed up. We are going to be referencing some previous episodes because, Ben, you should know that this is not the first time we have picked up fraud on this podcast. In fact, I was taking it. Someone online said like, "Oh, this is like Oxide and fraud." I kind of like the fraudcast, Adam.
That's really good. Really good. I love that.
Did not come up with that one.
Nice.
Welcome to the Oxide Fraudcast, but we've got Adam had the delightful idea of a March Madness of Silicon Valley fraud, where you would fill out your bracket. I mean, and everyone knows that Theranos is going deep. The question is, Theranos is obviously coming in as a 1 seed. Are they gonna be able to take it all home?
Yeah.
But this is a bonkers story as far as and I have fallen down the rabbit hole on this one. I think this is just absolutely nuts. And so, Ben, maybe you can kind of give us the entree to this, because you are a material scientist who has a newsletter called The BS Detector. And this was kind of a story in January. And then we're talking, of course, about this paper that was written by Aidan Toner Rogers. A lot of notoriety around it: artificial intelligence, scientific discovery, and product innovation. And then there's this MIT retraction that from my perspective, came out of clear blue sky. But did you know that a retraction was in the works, or like take us through when you saw that retraction?
Yeah, so I had no insider information before. I saw on Twitter people were discussing that it was, MIT had put out a press release saying, we have no confidence in this work. And I remembered reading about the piece when it came out a few months back. It was kind of in between when I had finished my PhD and when I was starting a job. So I was like, I wasn't actually reading papers at that moment. And so I just read press coverage, and I wish I'd read the paper at the time, because I feel like I would have noticed stuff about it. But at the time I just saw the press coverage and I figured, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. Like they gave some researchers some AI tools and it helped their performance. And nothing about that was super, shocking. I guess if I'd read a little closer, it would have been shocking, like the extent to which it helped. But yeah, I saw it on the, when MIT put out the press release, Wall Street Journal, kind of covered their mistake. And I was, immediately captivated by it because, like you said, I have a blog called The BS Detector. I'm a material scientist. I'm interested in AI. So it's kind of a perfect story for me.
Right. I mean, is this am I controlling reality with my mind right now? Is this has this been created for my benefit? I mean, it feels like you're in a unique position.
Well, and on top of that, I actually I have not like I have a lot in common with the author of the article, but he played basketball and tennis in college. I played tennis in high school. I play pickup basketball now for fun. He went to Macalester. My ex from high school went to Macalester College. So I just feel like I had a lot of connections with him. And about the same age.
About the same age, right? Story. Okay, so you see the retraction and you're like, all right, time to actually read the paper. Your jaw must have been in your lap. I mean, so what was it like to actually get into the paper and read it? And at what point did you realize, holy mackerel?
Well, because I knew it was, getting retracted and it was fraudulent. Hindsight's really 2020 in that case. And so I was picking up on the things that I think are probably, BS in the paper. Again, I don't want to I guess there's some small possibility that actually the data is somehow accurate, or some of it's accurate, but he just wasn't supposed to have it, or there could be something else that was the reason they're retracting it. But I think that's unlikely. I think most likely it was, completely fabricated data, or at least, wholesale. Kind of
Yeah. Okay. So this is something I definitely want to get to, because I want to understand kind of where the fabrication starts. But don't you think we can say with relative certainty? I mean, as you said in your blog entry, boy, is my face going to be red if he's got legitimate data that has just been somehow manipulated incorrectly. But it really does not feel that way. This feels like it's wholesale fraudulent, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And there's a couple of in the blog post, I kind of thought that the smoking gun he has this material similarity plot where and this is where the methodology, it doesn't make any sense to me how this could be done. And it also doesn't make any sense how this could be done without I don't know, hundreds of hours of of work, and also, people who really know how to interface with the, materials project API and like a bunch of other stuff. It's not a simple task to do. But he has this plot where he's making the case that materials that were, developed with the help of the AI tools are less similar from other materials in literature, so they're like more novel. And he has this histogram of the material similarity before and after AI, and it shifts to one side. It's more novel, but the shape of the distribution's weird. There's like gaps between between the numbers on the plot, and it just doesn't make sense to me intuitively why that would like be the case at all. And then I saw one of his citations, which was like the second or third citation. Like it wasn't the main citation for the methodology, but he mentions it at other part. That paper has a very similar shape to their similarity distribution, except it's for drug development. So kind of a different use of that methodology entirely. And it has that shape, which might make sense for the molecules they're looking at. But it doesn't really make sense for a broad class of materials. And I think that he probably just saw that shape of distribution, kind of drew the data into that shape, and then put it in that graph.
At risk of, I mean, I think we're now past the point of having buried the lead, Bryan, but could we maybe rewind a little bit and talk about what the extraordinary claims that the paper made?
Sure. Yeah. Ben, do you want to do the honors? I'm happy to explain my inference, but happy for you to do it if you.
Up to you. I can
go for it, Ben.
Well, yeah. I was like, I hear from this guy enough. Like this guy's just going to start. He's going to start berating my beloved sounds again. So my beloved tones.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I can. Yeah. So the article ostensibly, tracks 1,000 materials researchers at an unnamed R&D lab that becomes, some big company that could support such a large amount of just materials discovery researchers, which I don't think this exists. Like, I don't think there's a company in the US that has that many people devoted to just materials discovery, such that they could all be tracked on the same metrics like this. That would be very strange to me. But maybe it's possible that there's one or two companies that have that many material scientists doing this. I don't know. And it tracks. It has a randomized trial, and the randomization is that they rolled it out in 3 steps for their teams at the company, rather than doing it all.
As one often does when making changes at a company. I mean, sorry, is everyone else just rolling out changes and not doing it in 3 different waves of random cohorts that align on it? I mean, come on, this is the way we do company changes.
That's right. Just like a scientist, yes.
Just like a scientist. I'm so sorry. Ben, I'm sorry to keep editorializing here. Yes, Prithvi, continue.
Oh yeah, no, interrupt at any time. So it's that alone was kind of surprising. And then of these 1,000 scientists, he tracks their age and how long they've been working at the company or something like this, and their degree, and but then he also tracks their specialization for materials, and it's very broad. Roughly like 1/4 in each of the classes of materials he lists, which are biomaterials, ceramics and glasses, metals and alloys, and polymers. And putting aside like a lot of materials don't easily fit into those categories if you're working with composite materials that are but whatever. It's just weird that there'd be such a large company with massive amount of researchers, 1,018 researchers that got the AI tool. So maybe some didn't. And they would also
specificity on what the AI tool that they're getting is. I mean, did I miss that specificity about what exactly these researchers are supposedly being granted? I mean, supposedly, one source said it was a GAN, but it seems like it's a GNN. I mean, did you get any details on that, Ben, in terms of like the AI tool that they're being granted?
Yeah, so he spoke about this on, I think someone asked him this question at, I don't know if it was NBAR. There's a recording of him speaking at some conference virtually. And he answers this question because they're like, "What was this AI tool?" And it's also weird because back in 2022 there wouldn't have been like certainly the LLMs that were out there when this trial would have started we're not going to be generating novel materials at all.
Yeah, they would have gone Nazi in a second, right? I mean, this is in 2022. You've been like, we're having like Nazis develop our materials now. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that things have progressed so much since then.
Yeah, but at the time there were like materials discovery AI tools that, I mean, and it's unclear how good they are, but there was a bunch of companies that were that are making they were at the time and still are, I'm sure, making, probably they've got a lot better at it, making these kinds of like artificial intelligence tools for predicting material structures or something like this. But they're like usually for pretty niche applications, and I guess I'm unaware. It probably exists that there is some like broad data, tool set for this kind of thing somewhere in the world. But I'm unfamiliar with what it would be, or what company it would be purchased from, if that exists. But he did say that it was I forget exactly the way he described it, but it was something like, you can feed it your proprietary data for the company, and that helps it. You basically give it like post-training data or something, and that helps it, predict materials in a particular domain. I think was what he was kind of trying to imply. Again, he didn't get these details in the paper, so I don't know if he really had something super specific in mind, but that's the best guess I have.
Yeah, and then the findings are that getting the AI tool, the unspecified AI tool, it's a graph neural network, had this unbelievable lurch in productivity, very clean lurch in productivity across these three waves. And just to the point you're making at the top, Ben, that you are getting, not only are people more productive, but they're discovering more novel materials, right?
Yes, and higher quality materials. So more novel and higher quality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why not? Oh, yeah.
And more patents, and across the board.
Someone else pointed out that it appears like the patent filings start at roughly the same time as the new materials spike, which that seems like very unintuitive, because you'd expect them to discover the new materials and then it would take a while for them to like actually file the patent. Maybe even a really long time, but they like both spike at the same time, and some economists were suspicious of that. I guess I don't really know what it's like to, what the patent situation is like at these companies, so I wouldn't know.
But could you just educate us a little bit? Because I think part of what is so ridiculous about this paper is, to me, it has like a very childlike sense of how material science actually works. Could you shed a light on how these new materials are discovered and brought to market? Because I refuse to believe it's as pat as it is presented in this work. I've got to believe that there's a lot more nuance to it than that.
No, yeah, you're 100% correct. And that is one of the funniest parts of the paper. I think it's very much like how an economist or how an econ student might like imagine, or someone who works in like an industrial organization, economics, something like this, would imagine that materials are discovered and patented, and products are made. But I would guess only a very small percentage of the R&D work is like, all right, let's have 100 teams of researchers go and just find new materials. A lot of it's in developing materials that they already know exist. Right. A lot of it's in working on processing those materials or making them useful for a particular application, or like modifying them in ways that wouldn't generate a new crystal structure at all. Through
I gotta feel like a bunch of industrial activity, just thinking about, we got a computer company, we make hardware, and there's so much engineering that goes into DFM for designing for manufacturing. I gotta feel like surely a lot of material science is like, hey, can we find a way to make this material more readily manufacturable, can we just change the economics of this? I mean, is that crazy? I mean, that feels like that's gotta be important for material scientists.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. Even like the stuff that, like, say, battery companies are doing right now, where they're trying to expand beyond particular battery formations because they have too much cobalt in it, so that's expensive. So they go to nickel, and then nickel's expensive, so they go to iron and manganese. And so a lot of that's like, these aren't new crystal structures of materials or new material. They're just trying to make the economics work by really slowly iterating on what they have.
Right. And as opposed to this idea of like, oh, no, we material scientists. And I love like the input to the AI are the properties that you want in your new material. It's like, is this a genie? Do you get am I not allowed to wish for more wishes? I mean, it just feels like it's incredibly reductive. And then, but the results, so they show a huge spike in productivity, in novelty. Then there's like this also very weird finding that these mythical material scientists are now like less satisfied with their job. They're finding like their craft has been eroded. I mean, that's. I mean, you just get to the point where, like, how is that even remotely believable? I don't know. What was your take on that conclusion?
Well, by that point in the paper, I was already like, this is nonsense. So the survey results were just like, I imagine he, put his beliefs on what people would respond, or picked something that was like mildly surprising, but not shocking enough to, to make people really suspicious. It's just funny that like every survey question has, a very low p-value, and it has like a significant finding.
Okay, so can we talk about the survey for a second? Because part of this is like he determined how much time is spent on ideation versus construction. And material scientists, the artisans that are material scientists, they love to spend their time in the ideation of materials, not in the tediousness of actually constructing them. I mean, it feels like he's got like this kind of this is a stonemason in your mind. I mean, I got no idea like where his mind is.
I think alchemy, yeah.
Alchemy, totally. I mean, it probably is alchemy to him. So, like, okay, fine. But then determines that, like, oh, they're spending less time on ideation and more time on materials generation. How do they know that? Because there's an administratively required audit log that, as a scientist, you log this, and he was able to. Did you see this, Adam?
Yes.
And he's able to consume all of these audit logs from the thousands of scientists to determine how they spent their day. I mean, it's like, what company on earth can take 1,000 knowledge workers and get them to fill out what is the equivalent of a TPS report with any kind of fidelity?
You're like these 1,000 PhDs, experienced researchers. We asked to like fill out a time card to like do productivity analysis. Like, yeah, oh no,
yes,
100%, right?
100%. And I definitely will not use this freeform text field to say that I stuck bananas up my nose. I mean, it just feels like. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I mean, but Ben, feel free to like condemn us as software engineers, but like. Certainly could not get software engineers to do anything. And they got half of the people respond to the survey, and these survey questions are just like, Ben, is that as absurd as it sounds? I mean, to you, the survey?
I guess in the company that he's created in his, in this fictional paper, they must have tremendous like worker discipline. They have like hundreds of teams, each of a size of 5. Like they have 100% buy into this like randomized trial. I don't know.
This fictional company needs to be talking a lot more than about merely their material science. It is the managerial alchemy that this company has discovered. I mean. This fictional company has really done extraordinary things.
Yeah.
But that I just thought was just, and then uses the survey results to get to kind of this happiness. And it feels like, Ben, it is all in service of kind of feeding this narrative about what AI is going to do with respect to our jobs. It feels like, and then that's like certainly how it was inferred by the Journal and the Atlantic and some of the other folks that published on this. Did you listen, by the way, to, I mean, I apologize for having DM'd you last night when I was falling down the podcast rabbit hole.
I read it in full, and I listened to a part of it to like hear what his voice sounded like during the podcast. But yeah, I read the whole thing. The interview.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It is crazy. And you're like, okay, so this gets us to like, I've got so many questions. First of all, where do you think this thing goes off? Like, what do you, and obviously I'm inviting you to wildly speculate here because we certainly don't know. Where is the ground truth in this, do you think? Where did he go off the road?
I mean, if the data is fabricated from the beginning, I guess he must have like come in, I mean, there's no data to work with from the start. So I guess it was just the entire thing was in his mind. I don't know.
I mean, that is going to be nuts. Because I actually don't see a middle ground for this. I got to tell you, like, I don't see how this isn't all, because there's so much here that, and I don't know if you saw, I actually was like, all right, what does ChatGPT think of this thing? And so I uploaded the paper and I'm like, hey, like, I'm just like trying to understand this thing's claims. ChatGPT is like super tight, looks great, methodology looks great, like no complaints, can't imagine anything wrong with this thing. And I'm like, hey, what do you think about like the 1,000 researchers? That's like a lot of people at one company. And ChatGPT, of course, it's such a sycophant. I mean, it just acts like, oh, you've just like, wow, what a discovery. You're right. You're really onto something. And of course, it immediately goes from there to, and you kind of start bringing up some of the issues in this thing. And it's like, oh my God, this thing is like obviously a complete sham. I just don't know like what part of this is real. Do you think he ever talked to a materials company at all?
I doubt it, but I mean, maybe like maybe he talked to like a friend who was working for one to like kind of get a vibe of what it was like. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Because and you talk about this as well, because you get into like another problem here is like, okay, let's mythical company, as you say, enormously disciplined, these incredibly small teams and so on, blah, 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 blah. Why do you give this data to a second-year PhD? I mean, Ben, you're coming out of your PhD. You know how like, oh yeah, all companies just give PhD students this incredibly high-quality data. That's the way it works.
Not only that, but his PI, right? His lead professor apparently, maybe either didn't broker this conversation, or if they did, also then backed away and said, you know what, you take full credit. Like, don't put my name on this paper, this seminal work. Like, you take all the credit. I'll just be happy to step back into the background.
Yeah, well, also the timeline of the paper, it implies that he had started it before he had even come to MIT. So I guess they were like, yeah, I mean, it's your work from before. But then other people thought that, oh, maybe it's real because, his advisors are really big names. So like, it doesn't make sense that they give him the data. Maybe they would give, one of these very famous people saying next to him in the Wall Street Journal cover, right? Chemalu's like the most cited economist in the world. So, okay, I guess they gave him the data and then he passed it on to the student, but that doesn't make a lot of sense either. So yeah, I mean, I think people were just like speculating as to why he had this data in particular.
Well, and there's definitely a halo effect there, right? In terms of, I mean, had he not been associated with a Nobel Prize winning economist, maybe this would not have had the legs that it did. But people, I mean, it reminds me, Adam, very much of Theranos, and kind of like the first people that kind of Liz Holmes endeared herself to allowed her to get all this other credibility. Like, and that credibility kind of starts with like a con job in a single professor's office. You know what I mean? And it's hard not to read that the same way, where he persuaded the Nobel Prize winning economist somehow that this was legit, and they clearly did not. I mean, Ben, you got to think that these two. What do you think their disposition is to this, and how much fallout do you think it's going to be for these two?
They're probably really torn up about this. I would guess they feel like really badly about it. It's also like, it's not necessarily their fault. I mean, these are some of the busiest people in the world. Why would they assume that this student at the one of the best econ programs in the world would have falsified this? There's a good chance he's just, the next one of them, the next really good genius economist. So, and they're not material scientists, so they might not pick up on some of the things. And, maybe they assume that he had more details. Maybe he was, misleading them with, so like, that's the thing that I don't know if I'm going ahead of myself, but there was the thing with the intellectual property complaint filed by Corning.
That is amazing. You got to talk about that.
This is amazing. Yeah, this is amazing. Yeah.
So someone, I think Will Wang 21 on Twitter found somehow, like, searched his name and Corning, maybe searched a few companies, and found an IP complaint with the World IP Organization, WIPO, for a URL, corningresearch.com, and they were saying, hey, like, you can't do that. That's our IP. You cannot make that URL. We're requesting that it be transferred to us. And I don't know if Corning I don't know if they were like, oh, this guy is the guy that put out that paper purporting to be something like us, or if they were just.
No. I say no on that. Adam, what do you think?
No,
I think this is like
totally.
literally This is a totally other division of Corning. It's like, no, this is just like what we do. And this is like, we've got a standing thing that we do this kind of search on. We always look at the new domain names, and this has come up before. I think it is like almost likely that Corning still doesn't know, by the way.
I'm with you. I bet this is some like AI. This is like some grep-based lawyer that just is looking. I mean, you know what I mean? Just like looking for Corning anything.
Lawyer.
And like knocking down, fraud and stuff like that. I'm sure this is just like first line of defense.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
They actually got a paper about how AI has made their division much more effective, by the way.
I'm sure it has.
Different study where they've actually like, no, we've eliminated all of our GCs. So I think, time will tell. But I think that this is like totally unrelated. They just saw it and like, no, we just like file this thing, and they won on it, right? Then I think that they prevailed.
The URL is like no longer up. So I would assume, it's certainly their case seems strong, but I don't know a lot about IP complaints. They are Corning. But what's interesting is that basically implies that he's using that. And I would guess he was using that. Someone said like that perhaps it was to send fake emails from, at corningresearch.com, or maybe to like make PDFs with convincing URLs. I don't really know what his goals were with that, but like that could have been why people believed him, because maybe he had correspondence with someone from Corning. So like that, that's pretty indisputable if he did that. So
definitely, and a part of the reason, like MIT definitely like launched this guy into the surface of the sun, right? Like because I think even their language is like no longer affiliated with MIT, and you're like, okay, but is he alive? Because you're actually not answering that. Like, it's not like
right. Have you let him live?
No longer affiliated with MIT. Like the press release is exactly what we said. No longer affiliated with MIT.
Yeah, sleeps with the fishes.
You do wonder. You do wonder, because if one of his advisors is like, hey, you've been working with this guy, I haven't like heard anything about it. Like, could you CC me on the next email? He registers this domain name and starts CCing. Don't you think? I just feel like
totally. I think MIT, would have it both ways, right? I mean, like most major institutions, when he was riding high, I bet that they were kind of riding along with him, and it was very obviously. There's another scapegoat, but easy to separate themselves from a second-year PhD student.
And when was the journal story, Ben? Do you know right off when? Because the journal was the kind of the first one to break this.
I think MIT broke. Wait, you mean the like original paper?
The original, the story that kind of this became a news story, and because I think. So the other thing that is, so in the complaint, they say the domain name was registered on January 12th, 2025. It is conceivable that it's part of fact checking at the Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, I need to see something from this. It's like,
no. So the journal story is late December 29th, 2024. But MIT does reference an internal review. So possible that like there's some internal review that's kicked off in fact checking, and that website was in service of that, let's say.
It feels very likely. It just feels it's insane, I think, that okay, so then what is your kind of, because Ben, you've just been through a PhD program. You've got a PhD in material science from a friend of mine from college, Rachel Bishop in college.
No, I didn't.
She's but she did her PhD in material science at Northwestern, like NAPE Plus Ultra, but NAPE Plus Ultra material science program. She, by the way, told a very funny story and I think it was Rachel herself, but it was not Rachel. It was a friend of hers in the program that was working on her PhD, because she got her PhD very quickly, if I'm remembering this correctly. Rachel, I'm sorry if I'm remembering the details incorrectly, but she got her PhD in, I believe, 4 years. And because her advisor lost track of the number of years she'd been there, and it's like, hey, like, we gotta like get you out of here. Like, you've been here for a long time. And she's like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, okay, God, I'm definitely not like average time is like 6 or 7 years for the PhD. Be like, no, we gotta like get you out of here. It's like time's marching on. And so when she actually got her PhD, everyone at this you've got your, I bet as I'm sure you did, you've got like a celebration. Everyone is, after you've successfully completed your defense, and everyone's like, man, you've set like the new land speed record. And her advisor's like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like, no, she got her PhD in like 4.5 years. And advisor's like, nope, she's been here for 6 years. And she was like, no, I've been here for 4.5. And apparently the advisor was like, oh my God, I lost a year of free work. what have I done?
Very telling. Yeah.
Anyway, but Ben, I mean, you've just gone through, and I presume was not 4 years, but like, I mean, this is really hard intellectual labor. What is your kind of emotional reaction to someone who is, as you say, like kind of like a doppelganger in some regards, like similar age and so on? I mean, are you just like, man, this just undermines all the hard work that all of the rest of us are doing?
I mean, on one hand, yes. On the other hand, it seems like what he did was very hard. Like, it must have taken a lot of work to create something like this, even if it was fake.
You're like, if you contemplate this sophistication of fraud and that much writing,
it's quite impressive. It's quite impressive, the extent and like the imagination. But yeah, I mean, obviously, fraud is pretty bad.
that back to Elizabeth Holmes. I mean, you got to hand it to her too. I mean, that level of fraud did not come easy.
It's a lot of work, a lot of sweat on the brow.
Yeah, exactly.
And if he could have pulled off a fraud of this magnitude, like he could have just done the work, and he wouldn't have gotten a paper in his first year of this magnitude. But like, I feel like he would have been fine.
Well, and this gets you to kind of that larger question of like, what goes on? Because I mean, this is a person who's got a ton of things going for them, right? Like, has got a sterling education. As you say, played college hoops. I mean, this is what a polymath. And like, where in kind of the progression of things did it enter your mind to like take? I mean, and also, like, did you play this out? Like, is this going to work? Is this? And I definitely wondered, and part of the reason I was listening to that podcast closely is he at some point like, oh shit, this is getting way too much attention. Like, I'm supposed to use this to like get my PhD. I'm not supposed to be a media darling with this, and this is going to cause way too much attention to cause. I mean, but he doesn't seem to be thinking that. I don't know. What was your take?
Yeah, I don't understand how he thought he would get away with it. I mean, like, it would only take one material scientist to to read this paper after it came out and just be like, what the hell? Like, that's not real. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking.
Well, and your newsletter, I mean, there are a bunch of comments on there that I thought were interesting, and where you had a bunch of people who were like, damn it, I read this paper and I thought to myself, wow, that's too many researchers. And I like the guy that said, like, I was really envious that, like, oh man, MIT gets all the great research, and I just I wouldn't have an opportunity to be like have that kind of access to that kind of data. And as he said, I'm less interested now.
But Bryan, you found an amazing comment on Hacker News.
Oh, I did find an amazing comment on Hacker News.
I've got that up if you want me to read it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, read it. So, this is, Ben, do you follow Hacker News at all? This is kind of this is like, I feel like I don't want to like introduce you to Hacker News if you haven't seen it, because isn't this like teaching someone to smoke, Adam? I feel like this is not.
That's the Y. It's the Y Combinator news.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, I already knows how to smoke. Never mind.
There you go. Right. Already pack a day habit. So this is interesting. A large U.S. company with over 1,000 material scientists, there can only be a handful of those, introduced a cutting-edge AI tool and decided to make a study out of it, randomize it, and give all the credentials to some econ PhD student. Would love to know more about how this came to be. Also, why his PhD supervisor didn't get a co-author. Never seen that. I'm always slightly suspicious of these very strong results without any public data or way to reproduce it. We essentially have to believe one guy's word. And you dug that out, and you're like, yeah, damn, like, spot on, guy.
That's a prescient comment. Yeah, this is when the original paper was published in the journal.
6 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Leander, who I actually then emailed Adam. I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you saw the epilogue on this, but like, boy, were you right on this." And Leander has heard of the podcast, going to check out the episode, but that was amazing. And saw that like this doesn't quite add up. And it was funny because someone else had kind of pointed out that comment on Hacker News. I didn't discover the comment, so I saw a comment that referred to the comment. And someone's like, "Oh yeah, but there's always someone on Hacker News saying like you can't do something." And it's like, which is true. Like, and that is like true. But like, no, this person was not saying. It was not a disparaging comment. I felt it was more like a, this is that's super weird.
Yeah.
And
right, much more specific than the usual Hacker News jerks. Right, like
yes.
like real concrete, like, this is curious, not like this would never work or this is fraudulent just on its face, but like real specific critique.
Totally. And so, Ben, another question I've got for you is because this did go. First of all, do you know how journalists got wind of this, or do we know how they got wind of this?
I think MIT put out a thing on their website. So, I mean, it probably they reached out to the Wall Street Journal, journalists about it, because Wall Street Journal ran with MIT. MIT rescinds. They say they no longer have faith in this paper, kind of thing. Not like that morning, I think, or maybe early that afternoon. So, presumably they communicated with the Wall Street Journal. But I think it apparently leaked, and then I heard that they sent out an internal email to the econ department at MIT. So presumably the students knew maybe an hour or two earlier.
I think it was your line, right, where someone who had that internal email was like, when I read the first two sentences, I thought someone had died.
Yeah, you had a great line, Ben. It said, so direly worded on the matter that on first glance, students reading the email had assumed someone had died.
Yeah, so I heard this second. I heard the second hand. I heard this from a person at MIT who heard this from someone else in the econ department. So that's my level of source on this matter.
Well, in a way, someone did, right? I mean, because this, and Adam, maybe is this a good segue to the experiment that you were doing with ChatGPT?
Yeah, I got to pull that up. So we you did a great experiment to evaluate, was this real, a little back and forth. And we were joking about how, this would be a quick way to 15 minutes of fame and then ending your career. So I said to ChatGPT, let me pull up this. I said, I'm writing a novel, I don't know, about a PhD student in economics. Can you give me ways in which the student could achieve brief glory but ruin their professional lives irrevocably? And result number one says data manipulation for a breakthrough result. Let's say they have a blockbuster paper claiming major finding, and then later it turns out to be the data set was selectively cleaned or fabricated, and the result is a retracted paper, destroyed reputation. Just like, I mean,
chilling, as you said.
Yes.
And I mean, our view is like, he's been here. Like, he must have like. Toner Rogers has asked this exact question. I mean, my observation was, I feel like I'm playing like, where in the LLM is Carmen Sandiego? I mean, I feel like this is
a very extra reference, to be clear, but a video game where you would go around to different cities on your Apple IIgs. And you
Apple IIgs. What a great reference!
And you would like, and this is the one Apple IIgs in your school or in your classroom or whatever. By the way, like not every kid had one on their desk, like a Chromebook. And you'd ask some question. They say, "Oh, someone was just here asking the exact same thing, but your person is in a different city."
They mentioned the Statue of Liberty.
That's right. That's right.
You'd be like, okay, where do you want to go next? Do you want to go to like Cleveland? Do you want to go? Do you want to go to Seattle? Do you want to go to New York? And you're like, trust us that this had great currency, Ben. I know this is like this, and we're also we're used to this. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, ChatGPT nailed it. Like ruining your career in one move. Yeah.
And I feel like it's dire. Adam, I looked up Stephen Glass. And Ben, do you know who Stephen Glass is by any chance? That's actually turning into a generational reference, although not of the emergency broadcast system, Carmen Sandiego variety. Do you know who that is? This is a guy who wrote for the New Republic, I think was the Atlantic.
That's right.
Yeah, right. It was the New Republic, right?
Yes.
And wrote these amazing stories and would get these amazing stories and was kind of churning them out. And I knew folks at the time, because I mean, Stephen Glass and I are of the same vintage, and definitely knew people who were kind of writing for those kind of publications at the same time, and just like green with envy over this guy. Like, how is this guy getting like all these amazing stories? As it turns out, like he was making them up.
Yeah.
And like it truly ended his career. I mean, he tried to go to law school. He tried to go to law school.
And in his career,
New York refused to bar him.
Right.
Then he went to California. California also refused to. I guess he passed the bar, but they refused to seat him there, and like fought that, and like they went through an appeal, and they ultimately like denied it based on character. It's like this stuff is gonna. You can't put this genie back in the bar. It's very hard to dismiss this stuff as a youthful mistake.
Okay, but did you read his novel? I mean, not his memoir. So yeah, I read The Fabulist. So
oh wow,
yeah. So it ended his career, but sort of, right? Because then he wrote a book about exactly what he was doing. Pardon me, not a novel, but more memoir. And I felt very, I mean, whatever, right? Who knows if it's made up as well? But a meta novel perhaps. But I felt pretty conflicted about like buying this guy's book about like how he had lied, cheated, and stealed. But you know, maybe. I mean, pardon me.
Did you steal a copy? That's right.
No, right. So then I stole the copy. No. It's around here somewhere, I'm sure. But I just mean like maybe that's the next step in the Stephen Glass fabulous plan, right? Like you achieve notoriety and then write about it.
Well, and Ben, you referred to another. I mean, looking at previous instances of fraud, you referred to something that I had not heard of. This "When Contact Changes Minds" piece, which I then fell down that rabbit hole. Do you want to explain that? Because that was a more academic fraud that definitely had far-reaching consequences.
Wait, are you sure this is me? What fraud?
You linked to. It's like you linked to a piece "When Contact Changes Minds."
When Contact Changes Minds.
Did you?
Maybe I did. Let me see. What was this about? This was about liqueur. Oh, I think someone else might have done this because I am familiar with liqueur, but like not very well.
So if you follow the link entirely fabricated to begin with, that is a link to this "When Contact Changes Minds."
Oh, I linked it in the article. Yeah. Sorry, I think you meant like
article.
Yeah. So my friend who proofread the piece told me to add this link in there.
Oh,
but I have heard of liqueur. I think I linked to like the wiki page about liqueur or about the fraudulent article by him. Yeah, I don't know a ton about liqueur, but he was also I think like a social scientist who falsified data, and then had to deal with the consequences.
What a great friend you have to be like, hey, I've got some other fraud links you need to throw in there. That's like you. I like the circles you run in, Ben.
Right.
Thank you.
Ben, there's something sort of chilling in your blog post where I think you were saying that you weren't sure that some of these publications, this article was in preprint, but you weren't sure if some of these publications would have ever sniffed it out, right? Like that they might have just gone to press with it. And these were some pretty sophisticated, like exclusive publications. Can you talk more about that? Because I kind of wonder what else is out there.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe it would have actually gone all the way through peer review, but maybe. I don't know. I mean, like, it's not hard to get a revised when you submit. I mean, like, also they may have asked in the R&R, they may have been like, oh, well, can you show us the raw data or like explain how you actually did these methodologies that like don't make a lot of sense in your brief explanation.
Just go register a domain. I'll be right back. Then I can give you all the raw data.
Right. And so like it's possible this would never have actually gotten published, or it's possible like 3 economists reviewed it and they were all like, yeah, the econ stuff seems reasonable and it's like stellar work, so sure. But and also reviewers don't like read over everything with a fine-tooth comb assuming that it's going to be fraudulent. I mean, they generally operate from the assumption that the work is real. But I mean,
is there also a peril of the fact this is cross-disciplinary work, right? And so you're relying on someone who is an economist to have enough material science knowledge or be able to phone a friend for it. Is that part of the kind of the crack that's able to squeeze through? Is the fact that it's cross-disciplinary?
Maybe it's possible they would have reached out in the editorial process. I don't know how it works at those journals. I mean, it's a really good journal. Maybe they would have asked the material scientists to check it. I know that MIT, I think, solicited comments from a material scientist, and that might be how they originally uncovered it. I think, I don't remember which article, I think it was the Wall Street Journal. They said that like a material scientist who it didn't name, but I think people on Twitter were naming it, but I don't remember who it was, had like personally messaged, I think a Gemelu and an auteur or something like that, or maybe the department and like raised concerns with the paper, which makes sense. I mean, it's suspicious.
It's suspicious.
Right. I'm listening right now to this very mediocre book that every once in a while has just enough wisdom in it to keep me going. And one of it's from this broadcast journalist, and one of the things he talks about is a story being too good to check. And I just feel like this paper suffered from that in spades, in that it's just in the right time, and showing, Bryan, you were saying there's sort of this like bummer downside of like, oh, these pretend scientists no longer enjoying their pretend research. But I think that is part of what makes it juicy, right? If it was just like everyone's happy, more productive, and better, I think like the thing that makes this a headline and makes it exciting to think about and write about is the downside, right? Like this warning.
The thing we're losing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
We're gaining these novel materials, but we're losing our craft.
Kind of. And I think this loss of humanity is the thing that makes it too good to check and sets people's disposition to say, I want this to be real. This verifies either what I see or what I wish I could see. And maybe causes people to not be as thoughtful that they would, given the exposure that they're giving it.
Yeah.
Ben, what do you make of that? I definitely agree with that. What do you think?
Well, I have a little anecdote. There's a person, Robert Palgrave, who is a materials chemist, a professor, who I think I linked him at a couple of his tweet threads at the end. But he, right when the paper came out, he had a thread on it, and he obviously didn't assume it was fraud right then, but he kind of also, he had pointed out like, oh, this is interesting, like, it's this weird unnamed large firm, and then he was very skeptical of that the materials they were discovered would actually be novel and original, because in the past he had uncovered, and it wasn't fraud this time, it was actually a really good paper, an outstanding paper, from a lab, I think somewhere in California, either Stanford or Berkeley, on automated chemistry and like also AI-enabled materials discovery. And that was a great paper. It just so happened that, that the characterization tools they used to determine the novelty of the materials, it didn't quite pan out, and they were, the claims were a little more optimistic than they could support. And this was like battled out in the journal itself. I think he wrote a response or something formally, but or maybe he just tweeted about it a lot. But I think he kind of gained a lot of popularity for that, because he was, it's a kind of very good sober analysis. And so we had kind of the same critiques with this paper. And then once the fraud was announced, he kind of then, he sort of like cited back that original thread and talked about it a lot. And I think it was at the time that the other paper had come out, it was also kind of the thing where everyone kind of wanted to believe it was true that like the automated chemistry lab it could just come up with new materials and without a human in the loop, and it was kind of doing these really impressive things. And it didn't pan out, but I think honestly what they did in that paper back then, now if they did that again, I think it would pan out. Like the AI tools have gotten better, the characterization tools have gotten better. I think it probably works now. It's just a little bit ahead of its time, and they're making a little bit too ambitious claims. But with this, I think again it might be just a little ahead of its time. Probably in a couple of years, if you actually did some sort of 1,000 person trial, you might find that it does, it really dramatically improve their ability to find new materials. But just because it's like what people want to believe doesn't mean that you can write a paper on it as if that's the data. Certainly.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I gotta say, listening to Toner Rogers on that podcast, I'm like, this guy really wants this to be true, and he's got a disposition about like, well, like I believe in kind of I believe in the future of this technology and in terms of making things more productive, but I also got like concerns. It's like, things that like exactly mirror the kind of the findings that you may have created, which to me was kind of already suspicious. And I wonder, like, to what degree, and I'm eager to get the full story here, did he want this to be the story? And then maybe there was some reality somewhere that, Ben, to your point, just like didn't quite support it. It's like, yeah, they're using the AI tools and it's like they're kind of in the noise. Like, or, and we're doing it on a much smaller level, or like, yeah, they're discovering more materials, but they wasted more time because they actually had materials that they explored that they wouldn't have otherwise done. That didn't. I mean, you could just imagine lots of reasons why it just is not. It's not world changing, and it's like,
right.
It's not good enough.
The lack of job satisfaction is definitely the most credible part.
Well, certainly in an organization that is able to maintain that kind of survey compliance, no shit, people don't like their job. It's like, we all turn in the survey because we're afraid. The layoffs. Can we talk about the layoffs?
That was great. Yeah.
Ben, can you talk about the layoffs? This is such a cherry on top of this whole fecal Sunday.
Did I even mention? I can't remember if I mentioned it in the article. Oh yeah. To cap it off, here's how Toner Rogers describes a fortuitous round of layoffs at the firm. Yeah. So like, it's just funny that like he doesn't mention it all in the paper. Like, oh yeah, like 6% of the people, like left the job or transitioned jobs at the firm during the time, so we had to like take them out of the sample. None of that happens. But like right at the end, after collecting data, 3% of the researchers were fired, and that helped. And that and the ones who were fired were the ones that had like worse judgment or whatever, which means that they like weren't able to adapt to the AI tools as well or something, which is just perfectly fits with his story. So it's a little too perfect,
especially of perfect organizational harmony, where like they have stacked ranked everyone exactly accurate. I mean,
exactly accurate. No one, everyone agrees that it is this 3% that needs to be fired. And then I think it was in the podcast or maybe in the paper where it's like, oh, but don't worry, they also continue to hire more top producing scientists. It's like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, these things always. I mean, like they put 30 PhDs on the street. And I'm sure, like no one ever reported about that. And then they hired 30 back that were much more productive. It's like, oh yeah, all this makes sense. This is like no questions.
Yeah.
Like, what is going through the mind of someone who's like, I don't know, this paper needs a little extra something. I just like it doesn't. It's like what about a layoff? We'll do a layoff at the end of my. But don't worry, it doesn't actually. It doesn't affect my results. That's the other thing I think is like.
If anything, it confirms them, right?
It confirms them. It's like, what a fortuitous layoff. It's like, do they consult you before? No, absolutely. It is so organizational. I mean, it's like, forget the science. It is so organizationally deeply implausible. And obviously, so Ben, let me ask you, like, from your perspective as someone who understands like the how these tools have evolved. And as a material scientist, like, what do you see as the kind of the promise for these tools to actually revolutionize material science? I mean, obviously, a lot of things have revolutionized material science. I also love the idea that, like, when these guys talk about it, like, no one else has ever thought about the materials science. It's like, oh my God, like, no one thinks about materials. But it's like, actually, plenty of people actually think a lot about materials, actually. This is not...
Yeah. So for instance, at Northwestern, the materials department, it's the largest graduate department in the engineering school. So, people are doing, it's getting attention. It's not like materials are like the unsung hero or something like that. Like tons of companies definitely respect materials research. So I thought that was funny that he like kind of portrayed it as like this like underdog field.
Total underdog. It's like no one's thought about it. And it's like, oh, it's given us like purified silicon for our integrated circuits. Like it's giving us a hell of a lot more than that, by the way. Like if you're anyway.
Yeah. What was the original question? It was
like how much actual potential do you see there for these? Is this a domain that's going to be revolutionized by? And I've got to be more specific. Is it going to be revolutionized by LLMs? Is that what we're talking about? Is it going to be revolutionized by GNNs? I mean, do you see this kind of this possibility?
I think before the launch of ChatGPT, like people sort of thought that the most promising fields for AI would be kind of like, expanding what DeepFold did, which is just like going through the hard science fields and having it, do this kind of work to generate new novel things or whatever. And but I think LLMs have kind of changed the paradigm a lot. Where now, I mean, they're making such faster strides in automating software engineers and that kind of stuff, that I think that this will be later and less important than that. But it's hard to say, and I don't really know.
Can I ask a mundane question? Because like the thing that can I ask a mundane question? Because the things that LLMs are indisputably good at is understanding a lot of text really quickly. And as a material scientist, as any scientist, you're spending a lot of your time reading papers. Surely it just feels like, and I know this is not what AI proponents want to hear, but like, it feels to me like the most likely way that these disciplines are going to be revolutionized is the same way we're all going to be revolutionized. It's going to allow you to consume a lot more information, a lot better, a lot more precisely, ask questions of the research much quicker, be a better tool in your hands.
Is that ironically the like ease at which he made this, super comprehensive, like beautifully polished paper with like nice figures, that's a testament to like the time saving, the productivity advancement of AI, like better than the findings of the paper itself.
Okay, so are we going to get is Aidan Toner Rogers going to write an "If I Did It" paper that describes the mechanics of? I'm sure I can make an O.J. Simpson reference, maybe not.
Anyway. Ring the bell and another extra reference there. Yeah.
No, I know that.
Okay, that's well. Listen, we're down here at the home. We've got no idea who knows what. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it would be because like, you do kind of want to like maybe this is his second career. This is where Adam buys the fabulous, just because Aidan Toner Rogers brings us behind the workshop, does kind of like a Mark Rober YouTube video for writing a fraudulent paper.
Yeah, I feel like PhD students can have a lot to learn about how to use AI tools effectively in non-fraudulent ways. Like, for instance, just like, like towards the end of my PhD, it's so much easier than writing like 100 lines of MATLAB code to like just to make a single plot. I can have it generate a program to plot my data for me. And that's like a massive time-saving, bonus. Yeah. And obviously, I think what he might have done is used, I think I don't know if these are matplotlib, but like, if you have the AI generate the data too, as well as the plot, just wholesale one chunk, then that'll maybe get you there. I don't know if he like did the data by hand and then had the AI help him plot it, or if it was, he had the AI generate the data and plot it. I don't really know how he did it, but I mean,
but you are onto something. Because let me tell you, Stephen Glass did not have plots. Nobody was interested in how Stephen Glass had done the mechanics of this. But you're right. It's like this guy could go on like a speaking tour. It's kind of like you have the guy, you got like the school assembly where they got the guy coming in from prison or whatever, trying to scare you straight. And he can come in and like scare you straight on the fraud and then like show you how to use an LLM to generate your
you guys
your math
plots. You're so right. This is such a topic for every university, where they worry about LLMs and the authenticity of students' work. And this guy can come in and make a killing on the speaker tour. Man.
Aidan Toner Rogers, if you're listening, we got a path for you. We will book you, but you got to come clean. You got to describe everything that you did. Like, we know you made all this shit up, so you're gonna have to come completely clean. And okay, so Adam, when he goes on his university tour to lecture on, and I think I love the fact, Ben, I love it. It's a double header. It's like a lecture on the dangers of fraud, followed by a let me help you on your MATLAB plotting. So it's a little community service. Do you walk him in like leg irons and a jumpsuit? I think you got to. I think you got to have like. He needs like the tear. What's the teardrop tattoo equivalent of a fraudulent PhD student? He needs. I mean, is he going to have like the different LLM models that he used tattooed on his knuckles? I mean, walk me through what this looks like.
No, I think you nailed it.
I think this is his path. In fact, I think this may be his only path. What does ChatGPT think about this? I'm telling you what to write listen, I need
a second volume of my novel.
Second line, the novel's done very well, and people are. I thought I had a lot of closure in the novel. People are really demanding previous escapades of this guy whose life I thought was ruined, but now he actually may actually have a second life,
second act, yeah,
a second act. And then what's the other thing I would just say is that the thing that I'm also worried about it is because, and you kind of mentioned this, mentioned the when contact changes minds or links to it because of the advice you got. The one thing I am a little bit worried about, Adam, is that and Ben, love your take on, because this thing has like escaped into the world of the media. There were people like may have seen the story but never see the retraction. You wonder, because this is like MMR and autism, right? The MMR vaccine and autism starts with a fraudulent paper that has been retracted. But that's enough of a seed to kind of, and I think that when the contact changes minds, that piece also, like, people believed it because it felt plausible. Ben, do you think this is something that you're going to be dealing with? Like, people will kind of assume this is fact because they didn't get the update?
Maybe, although I feel like this fraud is like so interesting enough that, and the paper was never even fully published. So it might be that the fraud was like more famous than the actual paper was when it came out. But like, I guess it honestly doesn't even matter because there's so much other results showing like huge productivity gains from AI that like it might just, the findings of the paper might end up being kind of validated.
This is like Sam Bankman-Fried's crypto holdings, where like actually if you let me have it, like those, as it turns out, like I wasn't insolvent after all. It's like actually I was right on all those things. It was entirely fraudulent. So I guess that's an important point, is that from your perspective, the data is far too clean, but the results in the abstract that AI related tools would make material scientists more productive is not in and of itself earth-shattering.
Yeah, although I don't think it would like improve the patent filings by like 40%. That just seems like a lot.
Yes.
Like that those kinds of gains are massive. But also, like, there are other claims in the paper are probably not going to be borne out, because those were the ones that were like more surprising to the other economists, which were things like the best performers, or like the people who already were discovering the most materials, they had the most to gain from it, which is, I think that runs contra some of the literature already. But I mean,
okay,
that
was a surprising result. That was a surprising result, that like the best people did the best, and the like these shitheads that shouldn't even be on this highly disciplined team of 1,000 people, they're unable to make these tools do something for themselves. That is you're saying is a surprising result.
Yeah, that seems, I guess it seems surprising to the economists. And, I guess if I had to like predict what the outcome would be of if this trial was actually, carried out, this randomized trial at some company like Corning, I guess I don't know, like, if I would think, what hypothesis I would have as to whether the worst performing or best performing researchers would have the most to gain from the AI. Like, it doesn't seem necessarily like it would be incorrect, but again, you'd have to like actually do the study to find that out.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
I think also like mechanically hard to do all that, right? Mechanically hard to figure out who are the best researchers and the worst researchers. Adam, you and I both know that like looking at patent filings is definitely reductive. Like you're not getting, because Ben, to your point about like that's only looking at one dimension of science. It's not looking at many. Not all patents are equal. So like even just answering that question is really complicated. So yeah, it's very hard to do this kind of research, and maybe they just like he got sick of it and had the LLM do it, which you can read in his forthcoming book, If I Fabricated It. Well, Ben, this has been great. People should describe the BS detector a little bit, because this is a newsletter you kicked off. I'm sure you got a lot of new subscribers coming in over this.
Yeah, I did not expect this would go that viral, but a lot of people like the story. So, I mean, yeah, thanks for having me on, for sure. But the newsletter is just, it's, where I post things that I write. It's a more or less generalist blog, so it's not about any one topic in particular, but it's definitely a lot about science and forecasting. I do a lot of forecasting as a hobby.
That's awesome. Well, you definitely got you got two new readers in us for sure, and it was a terrific piece. I did, Adam, when I was going back and forth with Ben, I'm like, hey, so do you have like a Blue Sky handle? I don't really see you on Blue Sky. It's like, I haven't really logged into Blue Sky in a long time. Like, you may want to go over there because it's kind of gone viral over there. Ben, were you surprised at the degree that people were talking about it on Blue Sky?
Yeah, well, because I know that like there's just like numerically less users on Blue Sky than on Twitter, but like it was generating a lot of numbers on Blue Sky. Maybe someone famous had posted or something, but I was getting a lot of subscribers from Blue Sky. I noticed that after you brought it to my attention.
That's great. Well, again, we loved reading it. Thank you so much for being willing to join us and walk us through this. We'll have to have you back on the next Fraudcast. This is not our last Fraudcast, Adam. It just feels like we've got. This is an evergreen. We're going to come back here. This is like, it doesn't matter what technology we invent. There will always be fraudsters and hucksters and everything else. So there are certain ideas that are older than time.
Yes.
All right. Well, Ben, thanks again. Adam, I'll be less reverby next week. So this is my last time down in Reverb Central. So
exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Looking forward to slightly better audio, but I still welcome all the unsolicited comments about bad audio. I love them all. I share them. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.